Hi, everybody. Mr. Lavasser with you. And we've got a lesson on the definition of science. And science is defined as the systematic and rational study of nature. Systematic means it's an organized, it has a very step-by-step process to it. There's a system to it, systematic. And rational means that there's reasons behind it, and those reasons can be divided into smaller and smaller pieces. There's systematic and rational study of nature. The system of science is called the scientific method, and the rationality of science is called the concept of scale. The nature is something that's too large for us to understand, so we divide it into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces to understand it, and that is being rational, or making ratios or dividing it up. So let's look at our assignment. So this is what our assignment looks like. The top says science defined. And our content objectives, we want to define science and recognize the various branches of science and introduce the concept of scale. The different branches of science, the three main branches of science would be physics, chemistry, and biology. And each of those sciences can be broken into smaller sciences. Our language acquisition topics, we want to define terms based on textual evidence. And we want to look at clause structure, subject and predicate. And also subject and predicate are often separated by finding the process, the action, and the type of words that make processes or actions are called verbs. So the learning objectives, I can define science as the systematic and rational study of nature. I can name the main branches of the natural sciences and state how they're related to each other. I can recognize the relationship between the concept of scale, math, science, and language. Analysis, I can analyze academic texts to increase understanding of content and structure. So in section 2, we have a reading, and we'll take turns reading this aloud. And we'll also highlight for science vocabulary words and for definitions. And there are several definitions in this reading. Often in science writing, you have definitions built into the text. So we should be able to find these definitions. We should be able to find most of these definitions in the reading. So I'm going to start. I'm going to ask you to read through this. Stop the video now and read through, and we'll come back. Okay, you should have read through the text. Maybe we read that aloud as a class, or maybe maybe I had you read it silently. But now let's look for vocabulary words. Let's look for vocabulary words like science, in particular, natural science. There are sciences other than the natural science. There are the social sciences. So the natural sciences, and in English, in our language, when we say, or at least in American English, when we say science, we mean the natural sciences. So the natural sciences are what we think of when we say science. Science is the systematic and rational study of nature. Now, I could highlight systematic and rational, but I'm going to say that that's a definition. I'm going to say that that's a definition. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make that blue right away. Because we know that we're supposed to highlight definitions in blue. So science is systematic because it discovers information about nature through the system of experimentation. Science is rational because it divides the natural universe into sections to be studied using the concept of scale. Now, do you see how we introduced science here? And then the next thing that happened, the word science was introduced here. And then the next thing that happened, the next sentence began with the word science, and then we got a definition. The same thing is happening here. Introduced a new term, and then it was defined right afterwards. That's also a common pattern in science reading and writing. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to put my blue highlighter on and highlight the definition. The concept of scale is the idea that dividing things into smaller pieces and then comparing those pieces as ratios allow scientists to study the complex systems and entities found in nature. And I'm going to go back and maybe I'll use a pencil here and underline with yellow, because I want to note that nature, complex system, scientists, ratio. Those are also all vocabulary words that I think are important. So I don't want to turn the blue into green, because when you mix blue and yellow, you get green. So I'm just going to leave it there like that. And I'm going to go back to drawing and put my yellow back on. The Cartesian coordinate system. The systems of measurement and how natural science is divided up into smaller and smaller sciences are examples of the concept of scale. So the Cartesian coordinate system is the XY graph that you're used to seeing in algebra. Systems of measurement. So the XY graph is really an example of how we divide things up into nature. We divide nature into smaller and smaller pieces. And also measuring things, miles, meters, grams, pounds, all these things are actually forms of measurement, and they're also forms of the concept of scale. And then we have a graph here, or a graphic picture. And I'm going to ask you to read the rest and highlight for definitions and for vocabulary words. And then you should be able to find these definitions, I think with the exceptions of these two. I think these two aren't defined for you, and we will define them together afterwards, because that's one of the things we're going to study here is looking at subject and predicate. All right, thank you for your attention, and finish up this page.